I think in general, Israel very much promotes searching, and I think Jerusalem also gives you that space to explore, because you also don't have your parents on top of you. You don't have your rabbis on top of you. You can show up to shul wearing whatever you want. It'll be accepted. So there's more space to explore. And I think that when people come to Israel, sometimes they, for the first time, start to feel this desire to explore. It's like, hey, well, maybe actually the way that I've been doing things up until now is not really me.
Understand what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be a Zionist, what the land of Israel means. Like, learn about it. Understand before you're even here, and then once you're here, it'll make a little more sense, and it'll click a little better. Because even if somebody does all the preparation, maybe it's still not the right time. Everyone has a different story, but there should be an emphasis, and this is what we try to do, because most of our audience is in the United States, in New York. Is to educate about what it means to be Jewish, and from a historical, religious, and cultural standpoint.
Welcome to JLM Unplugged, a podcast about Olim for Olim. I am Gabi Danieli.
And I'm Michal Cohn. We are Aliyah coordinators for the Jerusalem Municipality. We are here to assist and navigate Olim in their Aliyah journey, from the initial planning to the final landing and beyond.
Join us as we bring you life stories, experiences, and special guests that you know and love here from our capital city. JLM Unplugged.
Welcome to JLM Unplugged. Unbelievable guests today. Very special episode. 2 boys, 2 men, 2 spiritual leaders, and people who've started different initiatives in their lives, living meaningful lives here in Jerusalem, and are also, to some extent, involved in business. So they're very grounded and balanced. Welcome Levi Saada and Meyer Grunberg.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having us.
We're going to just jump into it because, first of all, I just want to acknowledge there's 3 out of 4 with beards here. That's pretty special.
I'm sorry, I can't help it.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. We know that. When I first got to Israel, I also lived in Nachlaot before I met Aliyah. And I'll tell you this, there is a stereotype about men, women who come to Nachlaot. They're floaters. They're either living off hedge funds, which is very great if you have that merit, or if they're just not necessarily grounded. They don't have a plan. Some people think about that. And I'm looking in front of me right here, 2 guys who may look like that, but do not fit that bill at all. So Levi, I'm going to ask you right now, you grew up in America, and now you're involved in high tech, I think, and also you have a whole different meaningful initiative that we'll get to called Hineni, with tons of followers, a few WhatsApp groups worldwide. So, how do you break that stigma? How do you break that stereotype? How do you balance really fitting in the system of not being in the system?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. There definitely is a stigma around Nachlaot. The typical persona is definitely, like you said, someone who hasn't yet figured out what their next steps are. But for me, I think that just throughout my life, I've always been, passionate about creating and growing, specifically in my career. The spirituality actually came a little bit after, and when it did, it was a very clear decision for me to live in Jerusalem rather than any other city. And
is that when you bought this shirt?
It's
It's a spiritual gangsta.
Got this off the Amazon. There's actually a brand called Spiritual Gangster, and it's like a $75 shirt.
Right,
and then Amazon has Spiritual Gangsta with an A.
Nice.
It's $15
For a shen. A for a shen.
Yeah, but like exactly because of what you're saying, and the truth of that is exactly why I think that, and Meyer, I'm sure will speak to this as well. There was definitely a period of loneliness that I felt when I was in Nachlaot. I came to Nachlaot and I was like, don't really connect so much to a lot of like what you're saying, like people who are kind of in their in-between phase of like they just finished yeshiva or seminary, or they just finished college, or they're just not sure what's next, and I'm like already working and also wanting to live in Jerusalem, but people like us are hidden in plain sight, and I think that with a little bit of prayer and a little bit of patience, we started gravitating towards each other, and there's quite a few more of us.
I would also add to that we're not the only ones. Like, you know,
No, for
thank
sure.
God. Yeah, it's a big community. There's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
It's definitely more than not. And
Right, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Nachlaot is very eclectic. It has every single type of person. Also, like this city center.
yeah,
But like Levi said, sometimes it's that in-between stage until the next train ride comes and you got to hop on. But you guys are riding on both trains. Spiritual, fun, cool,
thank you.
handsome, you know.
We just met.
It's great couple.
Did your research?
Take me to dinner.
Yeah.
And yet, you both are working real lives, real jobs, whatever it is. And you both went to college. A lot of people, you know, they skip that. Or they do it later on. So, Meyer,
Yeah.
so tell me about it.
Yeah.
Levi said he felt lonely at stages. What about
Right.
you?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think is common for a lot of single Olim that come without their families, that make the leap. You know, for me, that was sort of like the point where when I was in America, in Miami, near Miami, where I realized in the middle of COVID, where if I don't go now, it's going to get more difficult. You know, thanks to the advice from my dad and eventually my mom. She was not on board at first, but you know, that moment of realizing that, like, if I don't go now, it's going to get more difficult, and I'd rather build my life there. And I didn't know about Nachlaot when I met Aliyah. I didn't really know where I wanted to live. Bichlal, I just knew I wanted to live in Israel, and a big part of me knew that I would figure it out once I got here. It was a lot of emunah and bitachon, and certain plans were made. I went to a kibbutz in Suba. I was there for 5 months, very low-cost living. I was working a remote job from America at night, learning Hebrew, getting acclimated, doing all my bureaucratic, responsibilities
stuff,
out of the way, Aliyah stuff out of the way. And I always recommend people do that, especially single Olim, if they don't know where they want to go. And it was in that time period that I discovered Nachlaot, that I found a job at Nefesh B'Nefesh on their social media. I continued creating content. I created Jewish history content and Jewish education content. And like everything kind of continued in a slower pace. But even then it was like, okay, now it's like the new challenge of like what we're talking about of like, the new challenge of like, now that I found the community, like I need friends. now that I found where to live, now I need to find a real community, and finding a shul,
So did that come
things to do.
naturally? Do you guys feel that you needed to work on that, and there was a specific way you did that to be able to get out of that loneliness, or it's something that took time and a lot of effort?
I'll answer that in two ways. One is in as much as you have a lot of these personas in Nachlaot that are more artsy and, you know, not really sure where they're going with their lives. I think that there is a period in the beginning where
That's the stigma. It's not necessarily
Right.
true. That's a stigma that people think about Nachlaot.
There
True.
definitely are
We
stable
know like
people.
lots of people
for sure.
who are artsy and
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah.
who are sitting on
Yeah.
a nice business
And Nachlaot
behind the
is
scenes.
the place to be in
Yeah.
Hanukkah.
So I'll just say that there was definitely in the beginning the loneliness came from a place of not allowing myself to connect with them because of the like, we're different. And then I very quickly realized that underneath all of that is a person who's just searching and is real with that search, as opposed to maybe other types of personas that are already in the workforce. I like to say like the Baka Jews or the Katamon Jews.
All right, we're going through all the stereotypes.
Yeah, for sure. Like they're just have things more figured out. The level of search and realness, I feel in amongst the people in Nachlaot, it's just higher. It's a higher caliber of people who are just like, no, I'm not going to just do something because the world is telling me that I have to get a job. It's like I'm actually going to feel into like what's good for me, what do I want to do, and sometimes that could take time. So for me, that was something that I was able to connect to, and so there was that part of learning to connect more to those people, and then also over time finding people like Meyer, and we've got a good crew of friends that are also like really playing in both worlds, balanced between career and spirituality, and that's that's something.
That's a good point that you made. But I feel like any Oleh that comes to Israel, and specifically Jerusalem, because it's like a microcosm of all of the Yatze Israel in general, and even Michal, she Mirali herself, it's a part of you is like, I'm going against the system that I was raised in.
Right.
I'm leaving. So it's not only Nachlaot, but Nachlaot for some reason has this gravity that pulls everyone.
Beyond Olim also.
The commandos of the breaking the system, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
But
you also see beyond Olim, you see a lot of different types of Israelis, different types of Jews. Just on my street, there's like literally Haredi, secular, Datilumi. Like every door has someone else, which is really cool. And if you wanna get out of your American Olim bubble, you're able to go to like an Israeli shul. If you're curious about what Sephardic davening sounds like, you can go to a Sephardi shul. You can go to Chabad. You can go to Hasidic. You can walk over to Shar Chesed and discover something else. That's not so far away. That's something that I really appreciate. And I didn't the whole stereotype. I didn't know about it. I discovered it on my way. Like as I moved there and I started, going to the Chabad on Shabbat and meeting different people and going to events, and also like specifically discovering music, like music as a tool to connect to Hashem and to connect to my Judaism. It was always there because I grew up with Nigunim. My dad had a cassette of like Chabad Nigunim that he would play in the car instead of listening to the radio. That's what he would play for us, and like they're all in my head. And that was like where it started as like a seed. And then once I get here,
it exploded out.
And 100% with like different musical experiences here. If it's Hallel or if it's Melava Malka or if it's literally walking down the street and a bunch of people are just in a circle playing music and praying, and then eventually Hineni, which we can get into at some point, I'm sure. It's just it's huge because in America it's very like one-dimensional a little bit when it comes to connecting to Hashem in prayer.
Because it's all done in school.
In school or in the shul that you're in, and that's it. And once you walk out, it's over.
So you're saying both of you guys, your main draw to coming to Jerusalem was the spiritual aspect, and starting that journey of like finding yourself.
For sure, but also for me it was like Tachlis. I found a job in Jerusalem, and then everything else sort of like fell in.
Fell into place.
But Levi, you work where? In Tel Aviv, right?
Well, I work from home 4 days a week, but once a week I go to Tel Aviv. Most of
Wait, hold on. You work 4 days at home.
Yeah,
that's an amazing gig.
Yeah.
I want like American viewers or like international viewers to be aware that this is possible. This is a big option.
Yeah, no, it's pretty sweet.
It may be an exception, but it's a great exception, and anyone could get that 4 days a week at home.
Yeah,
reminds me of my YU days.
But it's true. All my clients are. I mean, I work in sales, tech sales, and I focus on the Israeli market. So all of my clients and all of my prospects are in Tel Aviv, in the Merkaz area, Tel Aviv, Herzliya. So I'm there a lot, and I think that there's a general like. I mean, it's a bit sad, but there's a general discomfort that I feel like I can't just walk around with like my tzitzis out or keep, but like I get looks sometimes, and there's just a safer container.
Tel Aviv, you're saying.
Yeah, in Tel Aviv, and in Jerusalem, there's just a safer container. Like I can ride my scooter with my tzitzis flying, and like there's nobody that's gonna look twice. It's just a safer container to explore my spirituality. And not be afraid of how people are going to judge me or anything.
And social-wise, like, whichever one wants to take this one, social-wise, how do you balance like having a professional life and yet still being involved in the nightlife of Jerusalem?
Yeah.
And having also a religious life?
You have to learn when to say no.
Because like, some people have FOMO, they want to do everything at once, and they do nothing. And then that also comes at the expense of their family, their work, and everything.
Yeah, I think you just have to learn how to say no and like find that priority. I'm not saying it's super easy, and especially like right now I'm also doing a master's. It's all online, so it's super at Hebrew U, the benefit for Olim, Jewish education. I don't know if viewers that know this, but if you make Aliyah for your 30 within the first 3 years,
coming out of you.
you can get a free degree. That's an incredible opportunity. It's one of the main reasons I did it. Saying like that's another thing that's on my plate, and that I still wanna have social life. I still want to go out. I still want to date, and these are. It's also a priority. So it's just about like finding the priority and when to say no. Sometimes there's an event that looks really cool and everyone's just going, but you know what? Tonight I gotta stay home because I gotta go to sleep early, or I gotta finish homework, or I gotta literally call my parents. Like making time to call people in America is also something that we have to do sometimes. So that's what I would say to that.
Yeah. What about you, Levi? Because you're also involved in something that's called Hineni. You started explain what Hineni is, when you started it, and how do you balance work, travel, and also
let's make some space, everybody.
Yeah, wow. It's a loaded question, but I'll try to do it in a mitzumtzam way. So I think that in general, it's it's such a human need for such a human need for community, and living in a big city, there's a bit of a facade around community. You know so many people, but how often are you actually connecting in a meaningful way? So there might be events like parties or whatever, but there aren't really opportunities to connect as a community in a very meaningful way. And I'll say, I know that Meyer, he's a proud member of Chabad, but I'm one of the people in Jerusalem that haven't yet found my place in terms of a shul. Like, I haven't yet connected to a shul. So it makes it even more difficult when you don't have a shul, and there's many people like me. So just community just felt very lacking in my life, and specifically meaningful community, intentional community. So essentially, like 2 months before the war began, and this was like such a shkacha pratis that the seed started being planted before the war began, I just invited a couple people over to my house for what's called a song circle. Maybe some of the listeners have heard of this term before. It's starting to become more popular, but the idea is that we come together in a circle, sitting on the floor with some candles, and we spend an hour or two just singing and praying. And the idea is that prayer doesn't have to only be within the four walls of a shul, and doesn't have to be just with black text on white paper in a siddur. And that's what we did. And I think that for a lot of people, it was new. For me, I was exposed to it because my parents are Israeli, so I have a lot of friends in the Israeli world. And within the Israeli world, this culture is very popular. And people in the community were very taken aback, like, whoa, this is a really warm and meaningful space, and this is a way for us to come together as a community and connect in a meaningful way.
And no one was doing this before in Jerusalem?
There were Israelis doing it, but nobody in the English-speaking world doing it.
Like formally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the way that Levi does it is it's ceremonial. So it's like ideally you're walking in, your phone's not out unless you're making some content for Hineni, and you're probably Levi asks keep the talking to a minimum or to nothing, because then it's kind of like you're breaking the spell a little bit. So
it's like a shul outside of a shul.
Saying I'm trying to make the difference between what Hineni is and what Malava Mako or what's it called?
Like a
what's the word?
Kumzitz.
It's not a kumzitz. And some people walk in thinking it's not a farbrengen, which they're all its own special thing in its time and its space. Like I everyone can gain something in a similar way, but it's a different type of experience that I think that like you break the mold of like what that is supposed to be, and not to take away from the kumzitz or the farbrengen. It's a different experience.
And mainly Olim go to this?
Well, since that's kind of my community, that's the Olim. And the focus is Olim because I feel it's become kind of very clear to me that because I kind of play, I'm in both worlds, the Israeli world and the English-speaking world. I feel that I'm a bit of a bridge, and so I'm actually wanting to focus on bringing a lot of the stuff that I've been exposed to in the Israeli world to the English-speaking world, including this culture of song circles. And that's just how Hineni began. And obviously when the war broke out, the next day I felt people need to be together during this time. Like, we're from the States, we don't have immediate family here. We didn't grow up with rockets flying over our head like most Israelis, where they can kind of like, okay, another day, and it was just insane. Like, we didn't really know how to process or deal with it, and people were freaking out. And so just invited people over to my house for one of these kind of gatherings. And, besides for singing and praying, there's also time for people to share what's on their heart and what they're going through and what their prayers are. And from there, it just blew up. People were like needing this like oxygen. And we were doing these song circles weekly, and we expanded into, men's breath work and sound healing and all sorts of modalities around, how can we come together as a community and ensure that everybody knows that this process we're going through, this trauma that we've been experiencing, that we are experiencing, and the healing that needs to happen, from that trauma, how do we make sure to do that together in a contained environment? And, I can go on and on about
because I wanted to say, like, the community that you built, like, I'm a very big student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he says labels are for clothing. But when I'm listening to this and people are saying, okay, but this is just, let's label it for label's sake, Nachlaot type of people, But from what I heard about Hineni, it's people from all different types of backgrounds. It's even people who we call them straight shooters.
Yeah.
And so people would label from what they see from outside, okay, Nachlaot is this way, Hineni, breathwork communities do this. Like, for example, there's a very big breathwork guy that I know. So people label them in a certain way. But here with Hineni, especially in Jerusalem, you're saying the label is Olim. And there's Olim from all different types.
Because the war...
And I saw one of your videos, you even have people who are ultra-Orthodox that show up.
Yes, yeah, like Hasidim. It's incredible. I feel that the war shattered all of those stigmas and titles and categories, and also even the ego of a normal person who would say, like, no, I don't go to like a hippie type of group like that or hippie gathering. Everybody was just like, no, I need to be with people. I need to, like, I'm losing my mind here over what's happening in the world, and I need to be with people. And yeah, like you're saying, like, it's just so many different types of people that have been coming.
You also see a lot of, we see in our work, like a lot of Olim who are coming post October 7th, and it's dafka, like they feel gravitated towards Israel, and they feel that, when they're in Chutz La'aretz, it's like they feel too distant from what's going on, and they don't know what to do with themselves. So it's when they come here, and it could be that it's maybe more than they expected, and the rockets, maybe they're not able to manage it however they thought they would. And so it's amazing that you have this, because it really, it's like for the Olim also, especially the ones who've come to Israel since October 7th, to have that framework and that support and that way to channel all these like raw emotions and, being here alone.
Right.
Yeah,
they
it's
also
incredible.
Don't get lost. Because people sometimes feel Olim come and they get lost.
Yeah.
Like it's the floating heads.
Especially when they're alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe not such a difficult question, but a difficult question, especially for Israeli society. Thank God, like, two grown, handsome men, passionate about life.
They're just mirrors.
Passionate about the Jewish people. Why not serve in the Israeli army?
You want to go first?
It's quite simple.
Listen,
For me, it's a simple answer. It wasn't a decision that I thought was a reality when I was 17.
Did you ever want to serve in the Israeli army?
There was always that tickle, I grew up watching movies, being in the army. It's like, cool. I think it was less of a Zionist thing, more of like a army cool thing. And when I came to Israel for yeshiva after high school when I was 17, that's usually the opportunity. People like do a year of yeshiva and then they go to the army. And I think I was just, more like, okay, I need to start school. I need to start like my career. Like this army thing is like, I don't know how much I want it. And then when I moved to Israel, I was 24. I was past the threshold. I was already in working motion. So would I have done it if I can go back? Maybe. But yeah.
I definitely wanted to. Like, it was a big part of, like, for, Jewish pride, Zionist. Like, when I came here for the first time 10 years ago, I did a program called Marva.
Okay,
which is for 2 months. You have all these different gap year program people.
Sage.
Yeah. So it's like Gadna. You ever heard Gadna? It's basically for 2 months you play army,
right? Okay.
And they give you a taste of Tiranut. Supposedly, if you go to the army, you have 2 less months at the end.
Okay.
And there I got a taste of it, and in addition to just loving Israel and coming back from that gap year, all gung ho, like I'm making Aliyah at 19, going to the army. My parents were like, "No, you're not. Chill out. Go to school, and then you can do whatever you want." Which I did, and thank God I listened to them. I definitely, it was in the back of my mind. Even when I first started making Aliyah, I think I was 25 when I started making Aliyah, and I started the process. 24, 25. I was past, but I still wanted to go I wanted to specifically be in Dover Tzahal, in the communications and PR of the army, because that's what I'm doing. That's what my skills are. That's what my passion is. I don't think I have the head for combat. I'm being honest with myself, and and then once I started the Aliyah process and I started talking to people that are connected to the army, everyone was basically saying it's the hardest unit to get into. You have to know people that know people that know people, and then even then we don't know yet. And also because you're a guy and because you're tall, they're going to want to put you in combat and you're not going to have a choice. And once you're deep in the process. So after speaking to people close to me and like really thinking about it, I realized like I want to keep working. I don't want to get thrown into something either ridiculously boring or combat, which I don't think I have the head for, and then feel like a failure if I leave. And I realized, like, okay, I'm gonna keep working. I'm doing something. I'm doing a service. The content that I create, the digital front lines, still, that's what I wanted to do. So I'm still doing that. And thank God, the job that I found, I say that by day I create content that encourages Jews to come home, and by night I remind them why they should with the content that I make.
Well, what do you do at night? If you can.
So I make content about Jewish history on a page called On This Day in Jewish History, which I started with a good friend of mine, Isaac Simon, almost 4.5 years ago. It's part of an umbrella brand called Jewish Original Media, where it's essentially a Jewish educational platform, mostly online, through content, we used to have a podcast, it's kind of on pause right now, The Two Tall Jews. He's very tall, yeah. We had over 50 episodes. It's all on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can listen to that. We had like tons of awesome interviews, and so I'm still creating content there. Thank God we have a good following. And
so what's like the focus and the goal?
Focus is to inspire Jewish pride. To understand that it's not stam that we're Jewish and that we get to not only live in Israel, but it's not moving to Israel isn't what it used to be. And even if you're outside of Israel, you can still, famously the Zionist thinker Ahad Ha'am used to actually be against the idea of just moving to Israel. He was just saying that he was all about cultural Zionism, which meant understand what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be a Zionist, what the land of Israel means, learn about it, understand before you're even here, and then once you're here, it'll make a little more sense and it'll click a little better, because you didn't just he was actually a big rival of Herzl, who was just saying he's going to get us all killed by sending people there, and in a way it was really dangerous at the time to come. And even if somebody does all the preparation, maybe it's still not the right time. Everyone has a different story, but there should be an emphasis, and this is what we try to do, because most of our audience is in the United States, in New York, is to educate about what it means to be Jewish, and from a historical, religious, and cultural standpoint.
Mm-hmm. You give off a Herzl look. Have you gotten that before?
Yes. Without my Shabbat Chabad hat, I look like Herzl. With the Shabbat Chabad hat, I look like a young Rebbe. So.
Maybe that's what brought you there.
Yeah, that's a show.
So I'll ask you this: a lot of people come to Israel, especially to Jerusalem, where religion, spirituality is very open. But some people feel like they take a step back. I've heard a lot of Olim say, when I was in America, I was probably more observant or more connected, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. And yet...
And that they lost it here, you're saying?
I don't know, they lost it. It's different.
It's harder to find.
It's harder. It's different. I don't have a word to explain it, but I could relate to what they're saying. Because maybe over there, you have to be on top of it. Because, you gotta... You're a Jew, and amongst, we have that famous saying in Chassidut, the lamb amongst the wolves. But here you're amongst lions, right? And you're the baby cub right now. So how do you guys maintain it? Because I know both of you on a personal level. How do you guys maintain it that you're not taking that step back from Hashem, or taking that step back from your connection, which is at one level in America, and now maybe he'll be a little bit different, but yet it looks a bit different as well.
Yeah. Wow, there's so many words there that my brain's step back and all these things, because I think in general Israel very much promotes searching, and I think Jerusalem also gives you that space to explore, because you also don't have your parents on top of you, you don't have your rabbis on top of you. You can show up to shul wearing whatever you want; it'll be accepted. So there's more space to explore, and I think that when people come to Israel, sometimes they, for the first time, start to feel this desire to explore. It's like, hey, well, maybe actually the way that I've been doing things up until now is not really me, and so with that, the wording take a step back. Take a step back. I don't know if it's the wording I would use, because at the end of the day, it's one relationship with God, and that relationship has different twists and turns. And I don't even know if let's say one day I decided, I'm not going to keep Shabbat. I just want to explore in that area. I don't even know if I would say that that's a down. If when you think about a relationship, it's a dance, and I think that Hashem wants more than anything for us to actually be on the journey, on the search, and not just do things out of rote, So I know for me, I've also had areas where times where I was more passionate about going to shul, times where I'm less passionate. I'm finding other ways to daven, and there's just, it just feels like there's more space to explore, and the journey just is more real, rather than I'm in a community and this is just what I do.
So where would you put, let's say, halacha in your life right now?
Wow.
Way to
It's a very
dig
deep
into
question.
the details.
That's what we're talking about. Because people come here, they think about Israel. Everyone's either in Jerusalem, like super ultra Orthodox, right?
Yeah.
But it's the biggest, I think, right, in population, the most ultra Orthodox in Israel is Jerusalem, and also the most Arab. Just we should know that.
Wow.
So population wise. And then some people come here.
The root is shalom. So I'm saying,
Right. So,
you have
and then
to figure
some
it out
people
here.
come here and they're like, whoa, people that I knew, people who I looked up to, they're not necessarily practicing as they did outside of Israel.
I think a big thing here is that here it's like you're walking. It's like Israel's kind of like a mikvah of Judaism in a way, where like you walk in and the entire calendar, you're surrounded by a Jewish calendar. You don't have to ask for time off. Yeah, you don't have to ask for time off for the holidays. So it's like almost like your day to day is very it's very based on like a Jewish mindset. On a very simple level. So for some people, maybe that they become a little complacent, and in that way where it's like, I'm just surrounded by it. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to, in America or wherever you might be living, you have to make an effort.
There's more of that contrast.
Yeah.
There's me as a Jew, and then there's non-Jews.
You walk out of the shul and now you're in America. You're no longer in that makom kadosh. Here, every step is kadosh. Every part of the land is kadosh. So it's like, you feel that even if the calendar wasn't aligned with you. I'm sure they felt that before Israel existed. I'm saying the state of Israel. Now the question about halacha. I grew up relatively observant. My parents were balei teshuvah. They taught us everything that they were learning as they were learning it. Like they grew up with nothing. In where was you from? Venezuela, a very, what you would call in America, conservative / traditional / reform community who's very connected to their Judaism, but don't you dare be religious. Very connected to Israel, but don't you dare move to Israel. And like that was they grew up with all these weird paradoxes, and when by the time that they were building their family, they said, we actually want, they connected the shluchim, the Chabad shluchim in Venezuela, and they found Judaism in a way that was never taught to them. And so that's what I grew up with, where it was like very open, and my parents were also learning as they were teaching. And that led to a place where by the time that I got to make my own decision whether or not I wanted to be observant, when I was 18, 19, 20, I wanted nothing to do with it because I wanted to explore. Like you said, I wanted to investigate. I was still living at home. And in those same years when I went away from it, when you say halachically, I started slowly coming back. People ask me like, when did you become religious? I'm still becoming religious. Like every single day I'm trying to add something. And halacha is really hard. I don't learn Shulchan Aruch, but I'm, everything I kind of know, I've learned either on the go or because I remember from my upbringing or from school. I think it's like Levi said, I completely agree with the fact that it's a dance. Now we might disagree on how we dance, but it's still a dance. And I think that as a man, we have a lot of responsibilities. As a Jewish man, you have a lot of responsibilities, and it's up to you whether or not you want to partake. Hashem gives us free will. And he gives it, Shulchan Aruch means that the table is set, and it's whether or not you want to sit down and eat from it and everything you want to do. It's up to you, and it's not all or nothing. And every single day is an opportunity for you to maybe add something. And if you didn't, you realize it and be like, maybe tomorrow. And if I don't, then maybe the next day. And, I think when people get really bogged down on like, oh, I'm not living a halacha life. And then they just get depressed. And like, you're not supposed to get depressed. You're supposed to be happy. It's a mitzvah to be happy. So if you're going to be a halachic Jew, you should be happy. And if you're not happy, then what's going on?
Right.
So that's that.
Sure. Levi.
Yeah, wow.
A non-Chabad perspective.
Parts of me
Yeah,
are
a non-Chabad with benefits perspective.
yeah. Parts of me are like, oh my God.
No, but
what do
I mean, I
reveal?
totally
What
hear
do I
you
not
100%. No, I hear Meir totally 100%. Like some people are dancing the salsa, other people are doing like high school slow dances, and other people are doing the tango.
Yeah.
What are you dancing, Levi?
The cha-cha. So for me, it's a bit more complex in the sense that I also grew up with parents who are balei tshuva, who the way I see it is they came back to Judaism more from a place of like, okay, like, you know, we're building a family, like we should start keeping Shabbat and kosher. And like, okay, they chose an area to live. Like, okay, we got to send our kids to Jewish school, and like, what's the closest school? And it happened to be a Haredi school. Well, actually, they sent my 2 older siblings to the Haredi school. I went to a modern Orthodox school, but I got thrown out in nursery.
Okay.
So anyways, for all intents and purposes, I
forgot the color black.
I grew up in this Haredi environment, and it was intense. Like, ad kedei kach, like we couldn't wear any sweaters with words on it. Like our shoes couldn't have like Nike signs. Like we had a dress code, just wearing button downs that were blue and white. It was really intense. We had to sign a contract that we don't have TV in the house.
That's crazy.
And if we have internet, like there's a filter on the internet. Like we have to sign it. Like I and my parents had to sign. I'm like a freaking second grader signing a contract. I'm like a second grader signing a contract. Like it was pretty intense, and more than that, it was pretty oppressive, you know, from a religious perspective. And there was a bit of a dissonance between what I had experienced in school, and then I go back home and like I have these parents who are just more like modern. Like my dad's singing Pink Floyd at the Shabbat table. Actually, like whenever I would be in the car with my dad, and we would like get home, park the car, and if there was like a song that was still, and it was the middle of the song, he wouldn't let me leave the car until the song was over. Like he was super passionate about classic rock, and you know, that's kind of what I grew up with, and there was like this tension for many years, and it wasn't pretty, I'll say, and since then, like I've had a Chabad phase where I was spending, it was my last year in YU, I was spending every Shabbat in Crown Heights with Zach and Shlomo Gason and Rav Pinson, and then I had a Breslov phase where I was going to Uman. Well, I actually just went to Uman, but I was like very
more
much
than once a year.
Yeah. Like also I was growing out my payas. I grew out my beard. I grew out my payas. So there was a lot of like exploring and trying to find like, okay, where is the version of God that actually is going to resonate with me? Because the God that I experienced as a kid growing up, he's mean. He's not cool. He's mean, and there's a lot of guilt there. There's a lot of shame there, and I think that like there's been a lot of exploring, and I'd say over the last few years there's more of a stability. You know, I don't have a long beard. I cut my payas, obviously. But to answer your question around halacha, I have to give myself the space to play with it, because otherwise, for me personally, I fall right back into the God of Haredi school. Mm-hmm. And I can't have that happen. Like otherwise it's just not worth it for me to like be a part of this tribe. If that's the Judaism that I'm going to be a part of, and that's the God that's going to be, you know, there's a story of Rabbi Nachlaot. He was playing chess with the atheists of Breslov or Uman, and they asked him, they said, Nachlaot, why, how do you believe in God? Like, you're a smart guy. What's going on? You know, like, you know, God doesn't exist. And he said, well, you know, the same God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. Yeah. And it's like, it's such a deep Torah, because it's like, okay, how can Levi as an adult, you know, learn to really come to face with like the real God, you know, the God that, in my opinion, and I don't know, I feel like people might find this controversial. I don't actually think he cares about what you do. Like, I don't think he actually cares if you keep Shabbat or do these things. But to ride off of what Meyer was saying, Shulchan Aruch, it's all a choice. And he's giving you these opportunities to live a certain lifestyle that is going to be the most optimized lifestyle, the most spiritual lifestyle, the most connected lifestyle. And so with that, I think that there's so much of like, okay, let me remove the shame and the guilt. Let me remove any feelings of I have to, and if I don't, there's an old man in the sky that's going to shoot a lightning bolt at me, and let me actually go on this journey of like what feels right for me. And there's also a difference between where I am today and where I want to be, and giving space for that. Like, okay, I know I want to get there, but I'm here right now, and this is what I'm going to focus on right now. So that's kind of Begadol my
beautiful. Well, what would you guys say, you know, Olim, kind of your background, or let's say pre-Olim, thinking to come to Israel, and kind of both exploring, not knowing exactly where they're going to end up, kind of looking back at yourself, a few years ago, looking back at like that perspective and that journey that you took, what would you tell them?
First of all, I think that each person needs to look at their own situation, like very objectionably. No, that's not a word. Objectively. Sorry, English is not my first language. Objectively. And sí. Apreta uno. I think you have to like really tap into the people that you trust around you. So wherever you are, if it's you're in America or in Europe or South Africa, Australia, wherever it is, like the people that you trust, speak to them. Like because they, number one, they love you more than you probably love yourself. And I'm talking about parents, best friends, partners. Like really, really speak to them and ask them like their opinion about it. At the end of the day, you should make your own decision. But the people around you can really help you sort of see it objectively, which is really important because it's still immigration. You're still, right? My parents always tell me that their biggest issue with Aliyah is the culture shock. And the fact that they did it once. They moved, they started over from scratch, and thank God, and when we moved to Miami. But that culture shock and that restart is really scary, and it's really valid to feel that. So every person needs to like really make that decision from like an objective standpoint, because there's obviously you have the emotion, you have the passion. Everyone went on Birthright, or they went on their gap year program, or they came to Israel on some program, and they're like, oh my God, this is it, right? And that's all fine and dandy, and you should have that fire within you because it's going to keep you going when things get crazy here, and when things get hard, and when things get expensive. That's sort of one of the things that's going to remind you why you're here. But yeah, so that's my biggest thing is ask for advice. Don't be afraid to ask the people around you, and then really make the decision on your own, and have somewhat of a plan. I said before, it's easy to come here single and without much of a plan, but I think some basic things should be covered before you're here. And Nefesh will obviously also I'm talking to American, Canadian Olim, the advisors emphasize Aliyah planning. And I'm sure you guys as well here in the municipality. Aliyah planning is really important because it's important to know what you're getting yourself into, especially for families like mamash and people that have never been to Israel or making Aliyah. That's always like a little bit of like a question mark, because it's like, really, you've never been and you're just gonna move there. So just
I would say plan A, plan B, and C. You need 3 plans because plan A won't work. It's a fact, because the way you imagine it's to be very different.
Right.
Plan B, and then plan C is more concrete.
And be very open. Be open to change.
That's why plan C.
Be patient. I think that was the biggest thing I learned after 3 years here is patience. Patience and knowing that things are going to work out, and you just need to do your hishtadlut. You need to put in your effort, do your part, meet halfway, and. Things will work out. You're in the land of Israel.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've discovered about Israel is that there's, at this point, there's such a good number of Olim that have made Aliyah over the years that there are so many different pockets in Israel with different nuanced types of Jews. And so in America, it's a lot more defined. There's the communities are a lot more specific in the way that they are, and in Israel there's just such a broader range. And so, like Meyer said, come, be open to exploring, and just be patient. If you're open to just exploring different areas, spending Shabbat in this community, in that community, you'll be in shock at how incredibly nuanced the different communities are.
And get out of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because you're living in Israel. It's a good idea to learn Hebrew or to try to learn Hebrew, even if you sound dumb at first, or they're like, oh, I want to practice my English with you, and you're like, no, אני רוצה לדבר בעברית, אז יאללה. And even if it sounds bad, just do it, because it makes a difference. And the opportunities once you get out of that American bubble, because you could make Aliyah from America and then move to mini America.
Yeah.
There's many American bubbles here, and it's like, why did you make Aliyah? Because, for the vibes? Which is good, it's valid.
Some great vibes.
Yeah, great vibes. But I think there's a big benefit to getting out of your comfort zone and, traveling the country. How many people come here and just stay in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and they don't go, obviously, be, aware of the security situation if there's anything happening in the north or the south. But like, see this country, it's beautiful, and within 2.5 hours you're in the most beautiful ranges, either a desert or a mountain, and it's like
Everything in one place.
in one place. And if you're living in the center, it's like, you're in a great location, so take advantage.
With that, I want to say it was an honor, a pleasure to have you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.
This is
Continue
awesome.
the amazing work. You're role models for pre-Olim and Olim who arrived and Olim who are here or are searching for life.
Yeah, and for anyone that hears this, like, feel free to reach out to me and Meyer. Like, we live here in Nachlaot, and we love to host for Shabbat, and we do these.
He makes sick
events,
Moroccan fish.
And,
Yes.
yeah, I do make some good Moroccan fish.
That's really
Spicy.
So really feel free to reach out. There's no reason that you should, be alone or whatnot.
At Hineni Community.
Yeah.
And I'm a Jewish history guy, 1H, on this day in Jewish history, Nefesh B'Nefesh.